Hey guys, tonight we step into a pair of sandals you might not want to keep on for very long. Because tonight, you're waking up as a lowly foot soldier in the Qin Dynasty. Yes, that Qin, the empire-building, wall-constructing, law-code-writing behemoth of ancient China. Before you think this sounds kind of heroic, let me stop you right there. If you're picturing yourself as a noble warrior with a polished sword and epic battlefield moments, let me gently replace that fantasy with a reality that includes starvation, yelling, and a lot of cold mud. You're not the guy commanding troops, you're the guy getting yelled at for breathing too loud. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of a gong, not gently, but with the subtlety of a frying pan smacking a bronze shield. The camp is already a flurry of motion, soldiers rustling into formation, sergeants barking out orders in a tone that suggests they've been waiting all night for you to screw something up. You blink the sleep from your eyes, and your back aches from sleeping on reed mats that feel more like flattened gravel. The first thing you notice is the cold, bone-deep, skin-nipping cold. It's still barely light out, but the day has already started without your permission. There's no coffee. Of course there's no coffee. You splash your face with water from a shared wooden basin, and it's so icy it makes your teeth ache. Your uniform is stiff from the previous day's sweat and grime, and you're already dreading putting it on. No one talks much. There's a kind of shared misery in the camp that doesn't need commentary. You glance at the mess tent. If there is food left over, it might be a scoop of yesterday's millet gruel. If you're lucky. More likely, it's already been scraped up by someone hungrier or faster than you. Your job today is training. That's what the banner says. But training in the Qin military is not about honing elite combat skills. It's about learning to obey. Quickly. Without question. The morning session is an endless repetition of standing in formation, lifting heavy spears, and marching in place until your legs stop registering pain. Everything is shouted. Everything has a consequence. One wrong turn of your head, and the instructor smacks the back of your helmet with a stick. Not hard enough to injure you, just enough to remind you who's in charge. By midday, you've already sweat through your tunic and earned a few fresh bruises. And that's just warm-up. One of the senior soldiers, a man with a face like dried leather and a voice like gravel, explains that the emperor's army must move as one. Not just because it looks impressive, but because it's survival. Coordination is everything when your general expects you to cross a mountain range by sundown. Lunch comes in the form of a shared pot. You're handed a rough ceramic bowl with a ladle of rice gruel and one suspiciously gray piece of vegetable floating in it. You eat fast, not because it's good, but because you don't know how long it will be before your next bite. There's no break, no chit-chat. Just more orders, more drills, more reminders that you are less a person and more a cog. And then, just when you think the day might start to wind down, you're told to grab a shovel. You've probably never been so intimately acquainted with a shovel in your life. It's not even a good shovel, more like a flat hunk of iron bolted to a splintery stick. But in the Qin army, shovels are sacred tools. You're not just building a ditch, you're fortifying an empire. Or, as your squad leader cheerfully explains, you're digging trenches to protect the emperor's plans. Not that you've seen those plans or know where this road is even going. Still, the ditch must be 2 meters deep, precisely measured. And it must be done before sunset. Or else. As the sun climbs higher, the heat and humidity wrap around you like wet wool. You dig beside other men just as miserable as you, their sweat pooling in the red earth. You all work in synchronized misery, trying not to be the slowest, because the slowest guy gets extra duties, or worse, gets reported. And trust me, you don't want to be the subject of a bamboo slip report. By now, you've got blisters forming beneath your calluses, which is a special kind of pain. The dirt is heavy, clumpy, and riddled with rocks. Occasionally, someone unearths a scurrying creature, which gets stomped or ignored depending on its size and resemblance to food. Your forearms ache, your shoulders burn, and your stomach is making a case for mutiny. But you keep digging, because stopping isn't an option. A few guys try cracking jokes. No one laughs. It's not that they aren't funny, it's just that everyone's too tired to find the energy. Once in a while, a higher-ranking officer trots past on horseback. He's clean, his robes are tailored, and his boots have no mud on them. You wonder if he even knows what a ditch feels like from the bottom. But you salute anyway, because not saluting gets you a caning. And there's a whole rulebook, literally carved into stone back at base camp, on how to behave. Qin legalism doesn't leave much room for oops. When you finally finish the trench, the sun is already dipping. You're soaked in a mix of sweat, grime, and probably someone else's elbow grease. You're not given time to admire your work, only a barked order to line up again. Another inspection. Another chance for someone to nitpick the angle of your stance or the color of your fingernails. There's always some tiny rule you didn't realize existed until it's being screamed at you. Historical records suggest that discipline in the Qin army was absolute, bordering on obsession. Some scholars argue it's what made the Qin so successful at unification. Others think it just made everyone terrified and exhausted. Both might be true. Dinner is barely a step above lunch. The same gray gruel. Maybe a bone if you're lucky. You eat fast again. No one speaks unless spoken to. And the moment your bowl's scraped clean, you're back to organizing your gear for tomorrow. No one tells you what tomorrow is. Maybe it's marching. Maybe it's more digging. Maybe, if the sky's feeling dramatic, it's battle. No one's told you if there's a battle coming. But you notice the officers have been sharpening things a lot more lately. When you finally collapse onto your mat, your back protests, your knees throb, and your eyes feel like sandpaper. There's no pillow, no blanket, just your stiff uniform and whatever warmth your own body can muster. Outside, someone is snoring. Someone else is crying. You don't have the energy to do either. You just stare at the sky, or the underside of the tent flap, and wait for the next gong to ruin everything again. The next day begins before the sun even thinks about rising. You're jolted awake by the sound of a wooden gong, which somehow manages to be both hollow and panic-inducing. You scramble up, muscles stiff from yesterday's trench escapade, and join the sluggish, shivering mass of men outside the tents. It's cold. Your breath ghosts in the air. And no, there's no coffee. Just a ladle of hot barley water that tastes like boiled disappointment. But you drink it fast, because again, it's better than nothing, and because your squad leader is already yelling something about formation drills. Marching practice is its own kind of nightmare. You'd think walking in a line wouldn't be that complicated, but in the Qin army, it's an art form. Feet must hit the ground in unison. Spears must tilt at the exact same angle. If you're even half a beat off, you'll hear about it. Loudly. From 3 different people. One of them will probably be holding a stick. And not for decoration. The drill instructors march alongside you, eyes sharp, looking for someone to mess up. You try to focus, eyes locked forward, feet hitting the rhythm carved into your skull. Left. Right. Left. Right. The air fills with the clomp of sandals on packed earth, the squeak of leather straps, and the occasional barked command. You're sweating already, even though the sun is barely peeking over the hills. One guy to your left stumbles slightly, just a fraction of a misstep. He gets pulled out of line, yelled at, and ordered to run perimeter laps with a stone strapped to his back. You keep your eyes forward. Sympathy gets you nowhere here. This isn't just about discipline, it's about survival. Qin military philosophy, heavily influenced by legalist principles, emphasized unity above all. One man's failure is everyone's punishment. And since there's no such thing as off-duty, your comrades are constantly watching you. You're never truly alone. Never off the hook. Even the latrines have lines, rules, and a guy yelling about hygiene. Which is ironic, considering you haven't properly bathed in weeks. When marching drills finally end, you get another thrilling assignment, shield formation practice. It sounds simple, right? Hold a shield. Block a spear. But in practice, it's like forming a human tortoise. If the tortoise were blindfolded, hungry, and deeply resentful of everyone inside its shell. You crouch low, linking shields with the men beside you, while someone with a dull training spear tries to poke holes in your formation. You can feel the tension in the line. One weak link and the whole thing collapses. Sometimes the guy doing the poking isn't gentle. Sometimes the spear slips. You'll get bruises. Maybe a cracked rib if you're unlucky. And there's still more. By midday, you're carting firewood, scrubbing weapons, or helping repair a broken wheel on one of the supply carts. There's always something. Always someone barking orders. 1 minute you're trying to keep a fire lit for the cook tent. The next, you're rerouted to unload grain sacks. And yes, those sacks are very heavy. And yes, one just burst open all over your feet. And no, you don't get to laugh about it. Even lunch, if you can call it that, is chaotic. Same gray porridge, slightly colder. No seating, no utensils, and a lot of standing around awkwardly trying to not spill it on your boots. Rumors ripple through the camp as people slurp their bowls. Maybe the emperor will visit the front soon. Maybe there's a rebellion brewing. Maybe we're marching out in a week. But no one really knows. Orders are a mystery until they're shouted, and even then, they change by the hour. And through it all, you're still expected to keep your gear spotless. Your sword isn't sharp enough? That's a warning. Your helmet strap's frayed? That's a fine. You forgot to bow when the officer passed? Write home, if they ever let you write. That evening, as the sky shifts into deep purples and the campfire smoke curls lazily into the breeze, you finally get a moment to sit. Not rest exactly, but sit. Your legs hum with fatigue. Your hands are blistered, calloused, scraped. But somehow, you made it through another day. You look around at the others. Men just as worn out, just as silent, just as hungry. You wonder if this is what greatness looks like. Or just obedience with a helmet on. Historical records describe Qin discipline as brutal, but strangely effective. Some modern historians think this rigidity was the only thing holding the army together. Others argue it left no room for morale. Either way, you're living it. And just as your eyelids begin to sink, another horn sounds. There's a sudden rush of voices. Orders flying. You stand up, sore all over. Because once again, the day isn't quite over. Not in the Qin army. By now, you're learning that the concept of night in the Qin army doesn't exactly mean sleep. It means chores. Night watch. Extra drills if someone important is inspecting tomorrow. And tonight, it's trench duty. Again. Because what's better than spending another few hours knee-deep in a half-finished ditch full of mud, bugs, and the questionable smell of something that might have once been a rat? You grab your shovel, or rather, the communal tool with half a handle and a dented edge. Tools are precious. Sharpened, hoarded, occasionally borrowed from other units. No one complains too loudly about the quality, though. If you break it, you fix it. Or worse, someone files a report about it, and you'll spend the next few nights doing the paperwork equivalent of purgatory, grain counting duty. You trudge back out to the earthworks under the low glow of torches. Shadows dance along the dirt walls as others dig alongside you, silent except for grunts and the occasional complaint about rocks, roots, or ghosts. Yes, ghosts. Apparently, the last guy to die in this camp was buried under the new latrine. Whether it's true or not, no one wants the night shift alone. There's an eerie calm out here. Your breath forms little clouds in the chilly air. The stars above look ancient and indifferent. Every so often, you hear something rustle. Maybe an animal, maybe your nerves, but you keep your head down and dig. That's the only way forward. The trench has to be a certain width, a certain depth, and if it's off by even a thumb's width, the overseer will have you redo the entire section. You're pretty sure he owns a ruler carved from spite. By the time you're allowed to head back to camp, your fingers are frozen, your boots are soaked, and your stomach has begun to question if you ever ate today. You stumble into your assigned tent, a patchwork of rough fabric barely shielding you from the night chill. It's cramped, packed with at least 8 other soldiers. Snoring, muttering, the occasional curse word someone's dreaming out loud, it's all part of the ambience. You curl up on your straw mat, tug the worn-out blanket tighter, and close your eyes, praying for a few hours of actual sleep. But here's the kicker, someone's coughing. Loud, wet, persistent. You open one eye. Yep. The guy in the corner hasn't stopped in 10 minutes. Welcome to the medieval version of contagious disease. Sanitation isn't exactly top tier here. Latrines are just pits. Baths? Only when it rains hard enough. Soap? Technically exists. Practically absent. Lice? Constant companions. And once illness starts spreading in a tent like this, it's only a matter of time before everyone's wheezing and miserable. You pull your blanket up higher, as if that'll help. Still, you drift off eventually. Exhaustion overrides discomfort. And somewhere between half-sleep and dreams, you wonder how anyone survived this for years. Archaeological evidence shows signs of chronic stress and malnutrition in Qin-era soldier remains. One recent study found healed bone fractures in more than half the skeletons recovered from military tombs. So yes, you're not imagining things. Your body is very much under siege, even when you're not in battle. A few hours later, another gong rips through the camp like a slap. Morning already. Your muscles scream. Your eyes refuse to open all the way. But there's no choice. You groan, sit up, and get moving. Because in the Qin army, the punishment for oversleeping is waking up tied to a post, if you're lucky. As you step outside, a crimson dawn stains the sky. Somewhere, an officer is already shouting roll call. A new day begins. And you haven't even had breakfast. You line up in formation, eyes half shut, trying not to wobble like a bamboo stalk in the wind. The officer pacing the rows looks like he's already had 3 cups of tea and a fresh argument with someone. You'd settle for some warm water that doesn't taste like it's been strained through old leather. Your stomach growls, almost louder than the shouted orders. Ah yes, breakfast. In theory, you're entitled to rations. In practice, it's a mystery meal roulette. A bowl of millet porridge if you're lucky. If not, just some stale, rock-hard bread that's older than your last clean pair of socks. You take what you're given, no complaints. Complaints get you assigned to latrine scrubbing detail, and that's the kind of existential crisis no one needs before sunrise. The porridge today is hot, at least. You slurp it down with the elegance of a starving animal. One of your tent mates tries to talk while chewing, mentions a rumor, extra patrols along the eastern perimeter. Bandit activity. You don't even blink. Everything's a rumor until your boots are in the mud. After breakfast, the day's work begins. No, not battle drills or heroic defense of the empire. Today, it's fortification maintenance. You grab a basket, one of those massive woven ones with a shoulder strap that feels designed by someone who hates backs. Your task, hauling stones from the nearby quarry to reinforce the walls. Why? Because everything eventually sinks, rots, collapses, or gets rained on. And guess who gets to fix it? Not the officers. Definitely not the scribes. It's you and the other grunts. You trudge through the camp and into the work zone. The sun has risen just high enough to make everything painfully bright and way too hot for this early. The path is uneven, the rocks are sharp, and your basket digs into your collarbone with the tenderness of a vengeful ghost. Still, you march. It's part of the rhythm. One foot in front of the other. Haul the stones. Dump them by the wall. Walk back. Repeat. You lose count after the 5th trip. What's funny, if you squint hard enough, is how little praise this kind of work earns. You're literally helping secure the borders of the greatest empire of the time. The Qin Dynasty had infrastructure ambitions so massive, they built early parts of what would become the Great Wall. But will anyone carve your name in a stele for being the guy who hauled stone number 46,789? No. Your greatest legacy is probably the back pain you're developing. At midday, the overseer allows a short break. You sit under a scraggly tree that might once have been majestic before soldiers like you leaned on it for too many years. A few guys gamble using carved bone dice. One of them offers to trade a dried plum for your last dumpling, but you hold out. That dumpling is your morale lifeline. You nibble it slowly, savoring the odd combination of doughy exterior and mystery filling. Possibly radish, possibly sadness. As you rest, your mind drifts. You think of home, but it's already hazy. You've been stationed here so long that your village feels like something from another life. Were the fields really that green? Did your brother still owe you that knife? You don't remember. You look up at the sky, now blazing overhead, and wish for a breeze. Then, someone's shouting. Break's over. Time to return to hauling. Your knees crack like old scrolls as you rise. The rest of the day blurs together in sweat and repetition. You wonder, between loads, how long you can keep this up. Historical records show that Qin soldiers were rotated only rarely, and many were kept in service for years with little respite. Some died far from home, their bodies buried under the very roads or walls they helped build. The sun finally dips low, casting the wall in golden hues. You drop your last basket of the day, too tired to even curse. Dinner is another porridge bowl, saltier than breakfast but somehow less satisfying. You eat, nod politely to your tentmates, and collapse onto your mat without speaking. As you drift off, your muscles twitch involuntarily. Your dreams? A chaotic mess of shouting, rocks, and dumplings. Tomorrow will be the same. And the day after that. Welcome to the glory of being a Qin soldier. The bugle calls again. Not the nice, melodic kind, more like someone strangling a goose through a bronze horn. You jolt awake, back aching, tongue dry, your blanket half kicked off in the night. The tent is cold this morning, and you already know that means one thing: patrol duty. Which sounds dramatic, but mostly means you'll be trudging along muddy trails with 5 other guys who would rather be anywhere else. You gear up slowly, strapping on the same dull uniform that started to smell like damp wool and despair. The armor you wear today is basic, lacquered leather plates tied together with cords. Light enough to move, not enough to stop a solid arrow. You sling your crossbow over your shoulder, more out of habit than belief. It hasn't been rest-rung in weeks, and if you actually needed to use it, you'd be in trouble. Today's patrol is along the southern edge of the encampment. It's all scrub brush and uneven ridges, perfect terrain for turning your ankle or stepping in something best left undescribed. The officer leading your group is barely older than you but wears the insignia like he's descended from the Yellow Emperor himself. He talks a lot, mostly about regulations, proper formation spacing, and what he'd do in a real ambush. You let it wash over you like background noise. A couple of the guys joke as you march, mostly dark humor. How a former patrol walked right into a hornet's nest, or how one soldier mistook a farmer's goat for a spy. You laugh politely, but mostly you watch the terrain. Even if nothing ever happens on these patrols, you still know better than to get careless. The Qin military was ruthless about punishments for negligence. One slip, and you could find yourself reassigned to ditch-digging duty. Or worse, you might just vanish from the rolls altogether. You reach a fork in the trail and pause while the officer consults a clay map marker. It's cracked, and half the symbols are worn off. He squints, nods confidently, and leads you down the right-hand path, which is also the more overgrown one. Of course. You shoulder aside low branches, the smell of damp moss and something vaguely animal filling your nose. You catch movement in the corner of your eye, but it's just a squirrel, more afraid of you than you are interested in it. Probably. As you walk, you recall a story one of the veterans told you. About a patrol that found a hidden shrine, just a stack of stones and incense, but it freaked them out so badly they reported it as a cursed site. No one ever found the shrine again. You look around at the dense forest, the way the trees bend just slightly in the wind, and wonder how much superstition comes from pure exhaustion. Around noon, you rest near a shallow stream. You crouch, splash water on your face, and refill your canteen. The officer warns against drinking unboiled water, but you take your chances. Your throat feels like dry bark. As you sit, One of the patrol mates produces a small carved figurine from his pouch. "My luck charm," he says with a grin. "Keeps the tigers away." No one's seen a tiger in years, but you nod anyway. Superstition has its uses. The patrol continues in silence. No signs of intruders, no footprints, not even smoke on the horizon. Just the sound of boots squelching through mud and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Your thoughts drift again, to food, to home, to the absurdity of being miles from civilization with nothing but a half-strung crossbow and a half-believed sense of duty. You wonder if this is what greatness feels like. Historical texts often glorify the Qin military's discipline and efficiency. They don't mention how boring and bone-tiring the average day was. As the sun begins to drop, you circle back toward camp. You're muddy, tired, and relieved nothing happened. That's how most patrols go, thankfully uneventful. But even so, the threat always hovers. Bandits, rebels, or just some poor farmer with a grudge. None of them care that you're just a conscript trying to make it through another day. Back at the gate, the sentry logs your return with a grunt. You hand in the patrol tally. No incidents. No sightings. No missing men. A successful day, by Qin standards. Dinner is already being ladled into bowls. You get your share, nod thanks, and slump onto your mat with a sense of completion that's not quite pride, but something close. You didn't fight a war today. You didn't build a wall. But you showed up, stayed alive, and didn't screw up. Sometimes, that's the full measure of honor. The night doesn't promise rest. After patrol duty, you'd think you've earned a decent stretch of sleep. But the Qin military doesn't exactly operate on comfort. You're assigned to third watch, somewhere between not quite midnight and why are birds already chirping? Which means you get a precious nap before having to drag yourself back into gear. You curl up on your mat, your cloak pulled over your head to block the cold. Around you, campfires crackle softly, voices murmuring low, dice clattering on upturned shields. The smell is the usual stew of boiled millet, ash, and unwashed soldiers. You close your eyes and try to drift off, but your brain won't quite cooperate. Instead, it replays the officer's lecture about vigilance, a memory of home you didn't mean to conjure, and the faint suspicion that your boots might be growing mold. Then someone nudges you. Time. You roll out stiffly, grab your gear, and shuffle toward the palisade wall. Tonight's watch post is quiet. Too quiet. You sit with another soldier who's already half dozing, leaning against his spear like a scarecrow on break. You don't blame him. It's hard to stay alert when the only threat in sight is the wind messing with the torches. You settle into the rhythm. Scan the horizon. Count stars. Wiggle your fingers to stay warm. Repeat. Then try to guess how long it's been. 10 minutes? 40. The only way to keep your brain from spiraling into madness is to mentally recite old training chants, or sometimes, embarrassing poems from your academy days. You'd never admit it, but the repetition helps. There's something eerie about nighttime in camp. Without the usual noise of marching or hammering or arguing, the landscape seems too still, like the world's holding its breath. Every sound feels sharper. A twig snapping. A distant owl. The cough of a soldier somewhere behind you. Your eyes scan again and again, even though there's nothing new to see. Somewhere in the darkness, you hear what might be a drumbeat, or maybe your imagination adding spice to an otherwise dull hour. You grip your spear a little tighter. That's when the other watchman murmurs, "Ever hear the story about the ghost patrol?" You give him a sideways look. He grins. They say some soldiers who fell on duty still wander at night, checking the posts, making sure nobody slacks off. You don't dignify it with an answer, but you do find yourself sitting straighter. The reality is, night watch isn't just boring, it's exhausting in a different way. There's no adrenaline, no clear enemy. Just the creeping awareness that you're vulnerable. Bandits don't usually attack at night, but that doesn't mean they never have. Or maybe a wild animal, hungry and desperate, crosses into your territory. And then there's the chance, however slim, that some political enemy wants to send a message to the Qin by making an example of your outpost. You don't say any of that out loud. You just keep watching. Eventually, the sky begins to gray. The stars blink out one by one, and you can just make out the shape of the horizon. The camp starts to stir. You wake up the next shift and hand off your spear, giving them the usual warning, nothing out there. But keep your eyes open anyway. You shuffle back to your sleeping mat, but morning routines are already kicking in. Fires being relit, water hauled, officers shouting for formation. No more rest for you. You suck down a mouthful of cold millet porridge and wonder why it still tastes vaguely of onions when no one's had onions in weeks. This is the grind. The Qin army didn't function on glory, it functioned on discipline. Endless drills. Boring watches. Half-sleeps interrupted by brass horns. In fact, historians often praise the Qin's military efficiency as a key reason they unified China. But what they don't talk about is how many soldiers were probably hallucinating from sleep deprivation. You manage to steal a moment alone at the edge of camp, letting the rising sun warm your face. A rooster crows from the livestock pen, not yours, but nearby. You wonder who decided to bring a rooster to war. Somewhere between clever and completely deranged. As the day begins, you stretch out your aching limbs and try to reset. You've survived another night. It wasn't glorious. It wasn't heroic. But it was necessary. And that, in the Qin military, is sometimes the closest thing to a medal. Morning drills. Two words that should never go together, and yet here you are, barely functioning, being herded into formation like groggy livestock. Your joints creak, your stomach grumbles, and your brain is still half on that patrol route. But there's no sympathy in the Qin military. You line up shoulder to shoulder, spear in hand, trying not to yawn in front of the officer. Today's drill involves formation practice and synchronized movement. You're supposed to move like a single creature. No gaps, no staggering, no clumsy footwork. Sounds simple enough until you're in a line of 30 half-awake conscripts, all trying not to step on each other's heels. When the officer blows the signal, you lurch forward, nearly poke the guy in front with your spear, and receive a very public correction involving a lot of shouting and something about disgracing the dynasty. Drills are endless. Advance. Turn. Brace for cavalry. Shield up. Spear forward. Repeat. You're doing this under a sun that has no chill, in armor that seems to trap heat better than it deflects arrows. Sweat soaks through your tunic within minutes. Some guy to your left starts wheezing and gets told to die on your own time. This, apparently, is motivation. But the training has a purpose. The Qin were one of the first to professionalize warfare at scale, relying not just on individual prowess but on unit discipline. You're being molded into a cog. No, a sharpened blade in a giant killing machine. It's not romantic. It's efficient. And it's part of why the Qin steamrolled their enemies across China. Still, you can't help but notice that most of the training is punishment disguised as preparation. Mess up once and you're doing push-ups in full armor, or worse, latrine duty. There's always latrine duty. During a break, you sit in the shade of a wagon wheel and chew on a lump of salted pork. It's chewy, tough, and you suspect it used to be a very old pig. But it's calories, and that's all you care about. You glance at your hands, blistered, calloused, grime under the nails. You used to be able to recognize your own fingers. The next part of the day is weapons maintenance. You're issued a whetstone and expected to keep your spearhead sharp enough to shave with. Not that anyone's shaving. Everyone looks like a beard audition gone wrong. You grind the stone against metal, rhythmic and mindless, while listening to someone nearby argue about whether General Meng Tian's mustache is real. Important debates. A junior officer walks by, inspects your gear, and grunts in approval. Or maybe disapproval. With officers, it's hard to tell. They exist in a constant state of dissatisfaction. One of them starts lecturing about how each weapon you hold is an extension of the empire. You nod along, pretending this isn't the 10th time you've heard that metaphor. Around noon, you're back to formation. This time, mock combat, padded weapons, blunted tips. Everyone gets a partner and is told to spar without drawing blood, unless it's funny, one sergeant mutters. You get paired with a guy twice your size who immediately knocks you off your feet. You retaliate by tripping him in the mud. Somehow, that counts as teamwork. By mid-afternoon, you're coated in sweat, bruises, and possibly horse dung. It's hard to tell, but you've survived another round of drills. That means you're still useful. In the Qin army, usefulness is the highest compliment. You're not here to be clever. You're here to obey, endure, and if needed, die in the right direction. As you stagger back to camp, you catch sight of a training dummy, stuffed straw in a wooden frame, pockmarked with spear thrusts. You stare at it a little too long and wonder if this is how the officers see you. Later, you're assigned to help dig a drainage trench because you look like you need exercise, which is funny considering your legs feel like wet wood. But you grab a shovel and get to it, because there's no such thing as no in the army. Just varying levels of groaning. Drills, as it turns out, are less about making you strong and more about breaking what's weak. And you're discovering there's a lot more weak in you than you realized. But hey, you haven't passed out. That's a win. You nod to yourself, thinking maybe you'll even sleep through the night without waking up from leg cramps. Then someone yells that dinner is ready, and you practically sprint toward the mess. Dinner is a scene. You'd think that after a day of sweating, marching, drilling, and trying not to collapse in front of your commanding officer, you'd get a reward worthy of the effort. Something hot, hearty, maybe a bowl of pork stew, or even dumplings. You were wrong. Again. What's for dinner? Millet gruel. Again. You stare at the grayish mush with the same energy you'd reserve for a particularly depressing sunset. It's warm, technically, and vaguely food-shaped. You take a bite. It tastes like regret and wet gravel. There's a pot of pickled vegetables in the middle of the squad circle, and if you're lucky, you get a couple slivers of radish to spice things up. Once in a while, the supply wagons bring something better: salted fish, preserved plums, fermented tofu, but tonight isn't one of those nights. You chew slowly, imagining the banquet halls of Xianying, the Qin capital, where nobles feast while you develop a digestive system made entirely of beige carbs. Still, food is food. You're eating it with the rest of your squad, seated in a rough semicircle around a sputtering fire. One guy jokes that the millet tastes better if you close your eyes and cry into it. Another swears he saw a bug swimming in his bowl, but he ate it anyway for the protein. Everyone laughs too hard at that. Hunger has a way of making you hysterical. This evening's entertainment, because even Qin soldiers need downtime, is a storytelling contest. A wiry old veteran named Bo claims he once guarded the palace gates and saw the emperor himself. You suspect he's exaggerating, especially the part about catching an assassin with one hand while eating a meat bun with the other. But the way he tells it, you almost believe him. The guy next to you tries to one-up Bo with a ghost story involving a haunted spear and a vengeful spirit that only appears on foggy nights. It's total nonsense, but when the fog starts to roll in, you don't sleep quite as easy. Night in the camp is its own kind of brutal. There's no mattress, no pillow, no weighted blanket to cradle your dreams. Just a worn straw mat and the hard, uneven ground underneath. You wrap yourself in your cloak, trying to ignore the way rocks poke into your spine like passive-aggressive reminders that comfort is for civilians. The camp is alive with small sounds: crackling fires, distant murmurs, the occasional snore that sounds like someone being strangled by a goose. You lie awake for a while, staring at the black sky, trying to remember what it felt like to sleep without armor within arm's reach. Then comes the fire watch. Every few nights, it's your turn to stay up and keep an eye on the flames, making sure they don't go out, or spread and burn the entire camp down. You huddle by the fire, eyes heavy, wondering if blinking for just a little longer counts as sleeping. You think about the Qin war machine, how massive it is, how each cog has to keep turning, no matter how tired it feels. Somewhere in the distance, a scout owl hoots. Or maybe that's your stomach. You're not sure anymore. Fire watch is when rumors fly. Tonight, The whispers are about a neighboring state gathering troops on the Western Front. Or maybe it's just another border skirmish. The army never tells the lower ranks anything useful. That's what keeps morale so exciting. Everything's either terrifying or totally made up. You finally get relieved and crawl back to your mat, limbs stiff, eyelids drooping. You fall asleep almost instantly, dreaming of meals with flavor and chairs that don't have legs shaped like your own. And yet, for all the discomfort, there's a strange rhythm to this life now. Drill, eat, listen to nonsense, sleep, repeat. A kind of dusty harmony in shared suffering. Tomorrow will be more of the same. But tonight, at least, you're horizontal, full of mush, and alive. At some point, the sky turns pale gray, and a trumpet call shatters the misty silence of early morning. You jolt awake, limbs sore, joints stiff, and hair sticking out at weird angles if you're lucky enough to still have some. Dawn in a Qin military camp doesn't believe in gentle transitions. One moment you're dreaming of plum wine, the next you're scrambling to put on your armor before the officers catch you loafing. Today's agenda: surprise inspection. You line up with the rest of your unit, armor polished as best as it can be with a scrap of cloth and spit. Your spear stands upright beside you, and your tunic smells faintly of damp straw and resignation. The inspecting officer, tall, grim, and with a face that looks like it's never heard a joke, paces slowly in front of you. He doesn't say much. Just squints, grunts, and occasionally jabs someone's belt pouch with the end of his staff. A few poor souls get pulled out for extra cleaning duty. You try not to breathe too loudly. Once the inspection is done and no one's been publicly shamed today, you're assigned a new task: road maintenance. You blink. You thought you joined the army to fight heroic battles, not level muddy trails with a shovel. But such is the glory of empire. Qin troops aren't just warriors, they're infrastructure. The empire needs roads, and roads don't build themselves. So you and a few dozen others are handed crude tools and sent to smooth out a stretch of track the last rainstorm turned into a swamp. This, ironically, may be the most exhausting part of the job so far. The mud sucks at your boots like it has personal beef with you. Your arms ache from swinging the hoe, and every time you think you've made progress, someone comes along to tell you it's not straight enough. Somewhere in the background, someone tries to start a song to keep morale up. It's mostly off-key humming and sarcastic lyrics about marrying a shovel. By midday, you're drenched in sweat, flecked with mud, and questioning every decision that led you here. But the officer in charge seems satisfied, at least until a courier gallops in with orders. That's when things change. Fast. You hear it first in murmurs: enemy scouts have been sighted near the river valley. You're suddenly reminded that being a soldier isn't all shovels and inspections. Armor goes back on. Weapons are checked, rechecked, and rechecked again. The officers speak in hushed tones, faces drawn. You're ordered to pack up camp supplies quickly. There's a tension in the air now, a kind of electric stillness before the storm. And then you march. The sun is sinking fast, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and bronze. The road is rough, your feet are blistered, and your brain is too tired to panic properly. But adrenaline keeps you moving. You don't know if this is just a drill, a bluff, or the real thing. All you know is that you're headed toward something, and that something probably has swords. As the terrain grows rockier, the formation tightens. The officers bark orders to stay alert. You grip your spear a little tighter. Every rustling leaf is now suspicious. The wind picks up, and for a moment, you imagine what it'd be like to just turn and run. But there's nowhere to run to. You're part of a machine now. A dusty, muddy, hungry machine called the Qin Army. Night falls, and still you march. You wonder how your ancestors ever survived without flashlights. The moon offers weak guidance, and you nearly trip on a tree root at least 3 times. Around you, the other soldiers are equally exhausted, but no one complains out loud anymore. Complaining wastes breath. Breath is precious. You save it for keeping your knees from buckling. Finally, a horn sounds. Camp for the night. You stop marching, but rest is not immediate. Tents are pitched, sentry duties are assigned, and someone has to dig latrines. You pray you don't get the short straw. As you slump down near the edge of the campfire circle, someone hands you a strip of dried meat. It's tough as leather but tastes like heaven. You chew in silence, watching sparks rise into the dark. Tomorrow may bring a fight, or more road work, or another inspection. You have no idea. And that, perhaps, is the most brutal part of all. You wake up before the sun this time, not because of orders, but because your body aches in places you didn't know existed. You stretch out your legs and arms, wincing with every small movement. Around you, the camp is already stirring. Fires are being coaxed into life. Armor clinks softly. Someone sneezes and gets immediately shushed. There's a different energy today. An edge. Word has spread. Today might be the day. The scouts who returned during the night reported movement near the ravine. Could be bandits. Could be rebels. Could be a misunderstanding. Doesn't matter. You're going to march toward it anyway. You chew your breakfast, a strange porridge-like mash of barley and something unidentifiable, while trying to calm the flutter in your chest. You've trained for this. You've shouted drills until your throat was raw. But drills don't bleed. Drills don't scream. And drills definitely don't come charging at you with sharpened iron. March formation is tighter than usual. Your officer walks the line, barking at anyone whose helmet strap looks loose or whose spear isn't at the right angle. You barely breathe as he passes, trying to look invisible. He grunts and moves on. The sun climbs slowly, but it never feels warm. Maybe it's the tension. Maybe it's your sweat drying too fast. You march down narrow forest paths, through fields that were once golden with grain but now lie trampled. The distant rumble of hooves and wheels can be heard, and every time it pauses, so does your heartbeat. When the first arrow flies, you don't even see it. You only hear the thud as the man 3 rows over gasps and crumples. Training kicks in before panic. Shields up. Eyes forward. You've drilled this move more times than you've had hot meals. The next few minutes are a blur of motion and noise. You charge, or are told to. Your legs move. Your grip on the spear tightens so hard your knuckles go white. Shapes dart between the trees, some familiar, some not. You don't even know if you hit anything. You're too busy trying not to get hit yourself. The enemy, a ragtag group of rebels, judging by their gear, eventually scatters. Some are chased down. Others vanish into the woods. You're left panting in the mud, sweat mixing with splatters you try not to identify. Your spear tip is bent. Your legs feel like overcooked noodles. When the officer blows the horn to regroup, you're grateful just to be alive. A few men are missing. No one says anything. You gather the bodies quietly, solemnly. There's no ceremony. Just a rough burial and a note sent to the registrar, if you're lucky. You're ordered to set up camp again. This time, the fire feels colder. The stew tastes bitter. You stare at the flames and wonder how many more times you'll do this, how many more dawns you'll greet with dread. There's no time to dwell. Orders keep coming. Pack, move, build, fight, repeat. You realize now why older soldiers always seem so quiet. They've already thought through the things you're just now beginning to grasp. Somewhere behind you, someone starts humming a folk song from home. You don't know the words, but the tune is comforting. It reminds you that you're still human, that under the armor and the grime and the orders, you still have memories of childhood, warmth, peace. And for a brief second, even with everything pressing down on you, you feel the faintest flicker of hope. Maybe tomorrow won't be worse. Maybe. Night patrol is never glamorous. You shuffle along the trench line with your torch guttering in the wind, every step squelching in the half-frozen mud. Your breath clouds in front of you, and every sound feels sharper. An owl hooting, leaves rustling, your own heartbeat thudding under the stiff leather armor. This is the kind of quiet that presses in. You're not sure if it's peace or something worse. Tonight, your shift is long. Apparently, a shipment of weapons went missing a few days ago, and the higher-ups think someone might try something stupid, like selling them to rebels. So, you patrol. Slowly. In the dark. Hoping not to trip over a cart axle or walk into the camp latrine. When your shift ends, you crawl into the makeshift shelter beside a wall of stacked crates and fall into something resembling sleep. It's more like a series of shallow dozes, interrupted by dreams of fire, steel, and the distant screams you pretend you don't hear. Morning hits like a slap. You're back on your feet, washing your face with water so cold it feels like tiny needles. The officer barks new orders. Today, you're not marching. You're fortifying. That means digging trenches, raising wooden palisades, and driving spikes into the mud, punji-style stakes coated in who knows what. You jab one into place, then another, until your palms blister and your arms tremble. You're told it's for defense. But it starts to feel like you're building your own prison, one wooden beam at a time. By midday, a new twist, a visiting inspector arrives from the central command. Everyone tenses. These officials aren't exactly known for their warm personalities. You line up, armor polished, as best you can manage, posture stiff. He walks the line slowly, appraising you like a horse at market. You pray he doesn't ask any questions. He doesn't. Just grunts and moves on. Rumor has it he's here to check on morale. The irony makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. In the evening, you're finally granted a short rest period. You and your comrades sit in a loose circle around a small fire. Someone pulls out a bamboo flute. The notes drift up into the smoke and stars. For a brief moment, it feels like the war is somewhere else. You even manage a smile. Then one of the older soldiers starts telling stories about how the Qin used to make soldiers march with their armor soaked in lacquer, just to test their endurance. Another swears they saw a general execute a man for sneezing during an inspection. You're not sure if it's true. Honestly, you're not sure you want to know. One guy, everyone calls him Toad, though no one remembers why, starts complaining about rations again. 2 boiled turnips and a grain cake isn't a meal, he mutters. It's a slow starvation with decorative garnish. You all laugh. You laugh a little too hard. Before sleep, you oil your blade. Not because it's needed, but because it's a ritual. Something to give your hands to do. Something that reminds you of control. As you stare at the dull reflection in the metal, a thought hits you. You're not the same person who arrived at this camp weeks ago. That version of you had softness behind the eyes. That version thought this would be a chance to prove something. Now, you just want to make it to the end of the week without anyone yelling your name. The fire dies down. The flute has gone quiet. Someone snores softly. The night presses in again, but this time, you meet it with steady breath. Tomorrow, it all repeats. But tonight, you're still here. You're not sure what wakes you. Maybe it's the way the air shifts. Too still, too tense. Maybe it's the silence, the kind that rings in your ears because it's wrong. You sit up slowly, still wrapped in your coarse blanket, and reach for your spear. You don't see anything yet, but your instincts are already wide awake. Then it happens, a distant horn blast. Not yours. A signal from the hills. The camp erupts. Men scramble, shouting, boots slamming against hard-packed earth. A Qin officer is already barking orders like fire from a flint. You don't need to be told twice. This is not a drill. You grab your gear. It's cold. Your hands shake as you tighten the straps on your leather chest plate. You jam your helmet on, still dented from the last time you wore it. Everyone's rushing to the perimeter, and you follow, torchlight flashing over dirt, crates, and faces that all look like yours, wide-eyed, pale, tired. The enemy isn't here yet, but they're coming. It could be rebels, or worse, a local militia that got sick of conscription and taxes. Either way, they know the terrain better than you. You're a Qin soldier, which means you're both invader and enforcer. You're paid to be hated. They come at dawn. You're on the outer line when you hear the whistle of an arrow before you feel it. Thwack, into the post next to your head. That's all it takes. The noise explodes, shouting, clanging weapons, men screaming orders and curses. You brace your spear, heart hammering, and then it's a blur. They rush you. Not all at once, but in surges, like a tide testing the wall. You don't remember the first person you stab, but you feel the jolt of the impact up your arm. You keep going. You have no choice. If you fall back, you're trampled by your own men or cut down by your superiors. There is no room for fear. Only forward. Your boot slips in mud that smells like iron. You don't want to know what's mixed in. There's a moment when you're face to face with a rebel wielding a farming sickle. He's young. Too young. Maybe 15. His hands tremble worse than yours. You both hesitate. Then he screams and lunges. You react faster. Later, you won't remember if you struck first. Only that he didn't get back up. The skirmish ends as quickly as it started. The rebels retreat, leaving behind broken weapons, a few of your wounded, and the heavy silence that follows death. Your hands are raw. You can't unclench your fingers for a full minute. The officer calls it a victory. You call it mourning. Cleanup begins. You help pile the bodies, both sides, though some soldiers refuse to touch the enemy corpses. You do it because someone has to, and because if you don't do something with your hands, you might break. One of the older men quietly mutters a prayer. You wonder if the dead care who it's for. Lunch is late and tastes like ash. No one talks much. As the sun climbs higher, you're pulled for another duty, writing. Apparently, you have legible brushwork, so you're sent to help the camp clerk record names, losses, damages. It's your first time in the ledger tent. It smells like ink, dried blood, and burnt lamp oil. You write the name of a boy who won't be waking up. You pause before writing the next one. Just enough to breathe. Historians say the Qin army ran on precision and fear. That their discipline shaped China's first true empire. But they weren't here, standing over that ledger, recording a name you never learned. That night, when the fire crackles and the sky is unusually clear, someone starts humming a folk tune. You don't join in. You just stare into the embers, trying not to see the faces they remind you of. You survived the attack. Barely. And you'll sleep with your boots on, just in case. The morning after the raid is colder than usual, and not just because of the autumn wind threading through camp. There's a heaviness now, like the whole place is exhaling after holding its breath all night. You barely slept. None of you did. But orders don't care about fatigue, so you rise, stretch your aching limbs, and prepare for another full day of soldiering. Because rest, in the Qin army, is a myth wrapped in irony. Today is about patrol and punishment. The first is straightforward. You're assigned to a squad sweeping a nearby village suspected of harboring rebels. You march through fields and forests, the dirt caked into your boots like second skin. Villagers watch you with that same expression, equal parts fear and loathing. No one says a word. No one needs to. You're told to check for hidden weapons, or extra grain stores, or signs of messages being passed to outlaws. The local headman insists there's nothing. You don't find anything either. Doesn't matter. Your officer decides to set an example. A granary gets burned. A few men are whipped publicly. One refuses to bow properly and gets a broken arm for it. You're not sure which part feels worse, watching it happen or not stopping it. On the way back, no one talks. Then comes part 2 of your day, punishment for your own camp. Turns out, a soldier tried to desert during last night's chaos. He didn't get far, just a few miles before he was dragged back, bruised and weeping. You watch from the outer ring as he's brought before the command tent, tied to a pole, and made an example of. The punishment is as brutal as the message is clear, loyalty or death. There's no middle ground. Your stomach knots. This man shared rations with you, laughed at your jokes. Now he's a cautionary tale. His screams will ring in your ears for weeks. That night, your dinner is quiet. Just rice and boiled greens. No one mentions what they saw. Silence is the unofficial rule of camp life. You pretend the food tastes like something. You pretend your hands aren't shaking. Later, while washing your shirt at the stream, you overhear two soldiers whispering about home. One misses his dog. The other talks about the plum trees outside his mother's house. You close your eyes and try to remember something from your home. A smell, a song, anything. But it slips away like mist. You wonder if the Qin emperor dreams. Or if he even knows what it's like to hear bones crack under a whip. Probably not. What historians often highlight about Qin rule is its incredible efficiency. Standardized scripts, unified weights and measures, roads stretching like veins across the empire. But they rarely pause to ask what it cost. How many boots marched over how many backs to build that kind of legacy? You're not a philosopher. You're just a soldier. But as you lie down again, head on a bundle of straw, you realize something strange. You're getting used to this. The pain, the fear, the routine. It's becoming normal. And that, more than anything, scares you. You stare up at the stars. One of the older men told you that souls become stars if they die with honor. You don't know if that's true. But tonight, you count an extra one, just in case someone needs it. You wake before dawn to the sound of horns again, but this time, it's not an alarm. It's a ceremony, promotion day. Or, as you secretly call it, lottery of the damned. See, when a soldier performs well enough, or survives long enough, they get bumped up. But here's the twist, it's not always good news. Being promoted means more food and a better tent. It also means you're suddenly responsible for a dozen other guys' lives. And if they mess up, guess who gets punished first? Yeah, you. Your name isn't called today. Maybe that's for the best. Instead, you're assigned latrine duty. Again. So you spend the morning dragging buckets of waste to a pit dug behind the hill, swatting flies, and thinking deep, philosophical thoughts like, this better be the worst part of my day. Spoiler, it isn't. Midday, a scout returns with news. Another unit got ambushed 3 miles out. Rebels, again. Or maybe just really angry farmers. At this point, it's hard to tell the difference. Your unit is ordered to reinforce the area. You pack quickly, sword strapped, ration tucked, and set off with the others. The heat is relentless. You sweat through your armor. Every footstep kicks up dust that sticks to your face like flour. And yet, as miserable as it is, there's a strange rhythm to it. March, drink, breathe, march again. No one talks. You don't have to. The boots do all the speaking. When you reach the burned-out site, the air still smells like charred wood and something darker. You count 3 bodies. Stripped of gear, tossed aside like broken tools. One of them is a boy, maybe 15. His eyes are still open. You close them without saying anything. Dig graves. Your officer commands. So you do. You're halfway through your second hole when someone mutters about ghosts. The restless kind, he adds. You don't believe in ghosts, but that doesn't stop you from whispering a quiet apology as you shovel the dirt. By the time you get back to camp, the sun is falling. Dinner is cold noodles with pickled radish. Better than usual. Still, you eat it like a machine. No chewing, just survival. A few men gather around to play dice. You join, not because you enjoy it, but because laughter, however forced, keeps the dark away. Someone jokes about retiring. I'll go back to my village, marry a nice girl, open a tea stall. You all laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's impossible. As night falls, you stretch out beside the fire. You're still in your boots. You haven't washed in 3 days. And the stars overhead twinkle like they're in on the joke. They say the Qin army unified China, built roads, tamed the land. But they don't say it was built on sore feet, broken backs, and silent prayers. They don't talk about you, the nameless foot soldier who did everything right and still got nothing. But here's the secret no one tells. You made it another day. And sometimes, that's all the victory you get. The fire crackles gently now. Your breathing has slowed, your eyes growing heavier by the second. Around you, the camp has gone still. Only the rhythmic snores of exhausted comrades and the distant rustling of night insects break the silence. The stars overhead seem a little closer tonight, as if they've inched down just to keep you company. Your body aches, but in a quiet, familiar way. Like it knows this pain, like it's become part of the routine. And somehow, that makes it less unbearable. You think about your village, about the time before the call to war, about mornings with the smell of steamed buns, about your mother's voice, about simpler things that once annoyed you and now feel like dreams you can't quite hold on to. You let go of the sword by your side. Just for now. The ghosts won't come tonight. They've seen how tired you are. History books won't remember your name. But in the hush of this moment, in this soft stretch of silence beneath the stars, you exist, fully, profoundly, just as you are. A soldier in a vast empire. A flicker of life in a world constantly at war. And somehow, that's enough. So breathe easy now. The fire's warm. The night is quiet. The fight is paused. Sleep finds you gently.